Hey guys, it's Mrs. Yeagle, and this is Chapter 8 of The Darkest Hour. This starts on page 95. I pedal until the sun peeps over the Norman hills and until my wrist swells like a tire on a hot day. Then I grind my teeth through the pain and pedal some more, riding past the orchards filled with unripened apples and the thatched roof village that probably hasn't changed much since the Middle Ages. Paris feels half a world away, especially with the ocean nearby. I can't see its glimmering waves, but there's a crispness to the air, salty and fresh, that I've never smelled back in the city, unless you count a stroll through the morning fish market. About halfway to Cherbourg, I lean the bicycle against a tired tree stump and recheck the map on my handkerchief. The cloth has been stained with dirt and sweat, but I can make out the crisscross of roads and the lines of coordinates that Harkin scrawled onto it. I trail my finger over the safe house coordinates. I should arrive in a matter of hours, and my stomach tightens at the thought of the provisions waiting for me there. Bread, maybe some cheese, and a pitcher of sweet, sweet water. Dorner will be waiting there too, for Sabine and me both. I glance at the path behind me, expecting to find Sabine catching up to me with another bicycle that she's somehow stolen. But when I look behind me, I see only the apple orchards. Bon voyage, I whisper. I had forgotten to tell her that before we parted ways, and I hope I'm not too late for it now. It's strange. Yesterday I was more than ready to get rid of her, and now I'm feeling a bit sorry to leave her behind. But I tell myself that she'll be all right. She's Sabine, after all. If anything, the Nazis who cross her path should be afraid of her rather than the other way around. Just as I head down the road again, I hear the unmistakable hum of a truck. I glance over my shoulder, sends a sinking feeling into my gut. It's the Nazis, all right. I plaster on a smile, like I'm nothing but a country girl enjoying the summer sun, but I wonder if that'll be enough. They could ask to see my papers, to demand where I'm going. The truck comes up behind me, and the soldier in the passenger seat sticks his head out the window, a cigarette poking out of his mouth. My heart pumps fast, but as the truck overtakes my bicycle, he winks at me. "What are you doing tonight, baby doll?" he shouts. Then he makes a hand gesture so rude that I blush all over. If Theo were here, he'd pummel that German until his hands bloodied. But my brother isn't here to protect me anymore, and he hasn't been for a long time. I've had to learn to fend for myself, from dodging Papa's fists to appeasing Mr. Richard, and now to keeping one step ahead of the Nazis. That's why I smile at the soldier instead of pointing my pistol pen at him like I really want to do. When I reach the city limits, a briny breeze ripples through my stolen dress, and I catch my first glimpse of Cherbourg. It looks like a postcard I could send home to Mama, with the sky and a sea and a blazing blue and the pretty townhouses pressed together like sweet buns straight out of the oven. Out in the harbor, dozens of ships float quietly on the calm waters, reminding me of the bottled letters that Theo and I threw into the harbor when we were kids. Did any of them ever make it this far? Once I guide my bicycle into town, however, my quaint postcard of a city gets torn to pieces. It's clear that the war has brought destruction to Cherbourg. I pedal past a brick shell of a shoe factory, a casualty of the bombings, I'm sure, and over streets littered with fresh rubble that leaves my shoes caked in dust. The Nazis and allies have been playing tug-of-war with the city, hoping to gain control of its port. At the rate they're going, though, I wonder if there'll be anything left to Cherbourg once they're finished. I avoid the Germans the best I can, but I can only avoid so much. My fists clench around the handlebars each time I spot one of their trucks or a pair of their uniformed patrols, and I lead the bicycle around corners and into sour-smelling alleys to get away from them. These side streets take me farther and farther from the safe house, but I'd rather get there in one piece than not at all. By the time I track back to the coordinates, it's well past noon, and I wonder if Sabine has already caught up with me. I spot the safe house, but I don't knock straight away. I ride past it to size up the place. It's a sliver of a building, 4 stories tall and skinny as a matchstick. I look over the windows and roofline to detect whether it's been compromised. Maybe a broken window or a radio antenna poking out where it shouldn't be. But the place looks clean, at least from the outside. My pulse scatters at what I'll find on the other side of those walls, but I march up to the front door and rap 3 times. Footsteps shuffle from inside, and the door creaks open an inch, revealing a snow-haired woman peering up at me through a crack. She's a tiny thing with a long nose and round, unblinking eyes like a heron's. Suspicion paints her voice cold. "I'm not interested in what you're selling." "Madame, I'm not here to sell you anything." I step closer and dim my voice to a whisper so that I can tell her the code phrase that Harkin instructed me to give. "The piano will be tuned this September." Her expression does an about-face. A smile springs onto her lips, and she tells me the correct code phrase in return. I look forward to playing more Chopin. Then she tugs me inside the house under the wings of her shawl. Whatever took you so long? Come in, come in. Once I'm tucked inside the woman's cozy house, I'm greeted by a stone fireplace that holds a spitting hot fire. There's a pot hanging above the flames, and the scent of whatever is cooking inside of it, hearty and meaty, makes my mouth water. The woman drags me to her kitchen table and introduces herself as Eva Roche, while she plies me with a cup of water and a bowl of onion stew. Clucking over me, she insists on wrapping up my injured wrist, all the while explaining how she joined the resistance in Cherbourg a year ago, not long after her 2 grandsons were taken to Germany in the draft. I decided that if I couldn't bring them back from Germany myself, I'd fight the Germans here the best I could, she says with a long sigh. But she saves a smile for me. What am I to call you, dear? I nearly give her Fleurette, but I remember that alias has been compromised. Instead, I say Marie-Louise, the name on my extra papers. I scan the room for any sign of Sabine. Even on foot, she should have arrived by now. She's quick, and she knows this area, and I half expect her to bound down the narrow set of stairs. Did my colleague arrive earlier? She has dark hair and goes by the name of... No, you are the first. I was told yesterday to expect 2 girls from the Parisian resistance, but when both of you failed to come, I thought that the Nazis must have gotten to you. We escaped from them. Barely, I almost add. I don't correct her either about my being in the resistance. Outside of Lorraine, only a handful of French know about covert operations' existence, and we'd like to keep it that way. I drain the rest of my water and thank Madame Roche for it while I dig into the stew. I'll need to speak with Monsieur Dorner as soon as possible. Is he being kept nearby? She chuckles. You could say that. The resistance put him in my attic. I nearly dropped my spoon. He's been here this whole time? Yes, right on top of our heads. She points up to the 2nd floor. I agreed to take him in after another safe house came under suspicion. The resistance left him with you alone? Oh, I can protect myself, don't you fret, she says, sipping at her grilled barley tea and nodding at the enormous butcher knife that takes residence beside her copper sink. Dorner has been expecting someone to interrogate him. Your resistance contacts haven't questioned him yet? They did, but just enough to decide to contact your liaison in Paris. Do you wish to see Dorner now? My appetite vanishes and I set down my spoon. See him now? If Major Harkin were here, he'd tell me to wait for Sabine. Don't you forget that I left Chevalier in charge, he'd say, before reminding me of the 2 missions I've botched already. Marie-Louise, says Madame Roche, waiting for my answer. I almost tell her that my hands are tied until Sabine's arrival, because that's what Major Harkin would want me to do. But is it really? I realize then that it isn't Major Harkin muddying my thoughts and holding me back. It's my own doubts. They've been dogging me since my first mission, and they've grown louder since my run-in with Cherbourg. But I know I need to give him a great big heave out the window. I didn't claw my way through training and out of Cherbourg to turn tail and wait in the corner. Theo was no coward, and I won't be either. I get up from the table. Lead the way, please, I tell her. I follow Madame Roche upstairs and into a bedroom so narrow that it barely fits an iron bed frame with an ancient-looking set of drawers. Heavy curtains cover the closed window, turning the air stale. Madame Roche uses her shoulder to scoot the drawers aside, which reveals a false panel in the wall. She pries it open with her fingernails. Hello, she calls out. It's me, Madame Roche. The windowless attic lies in shadow. From the back of the space, a man steps forward, and as he enters the room, I stiffen at the sight of him. This has to be a mistake. This can't be him. Major Harkin made Dorner sound like a grizzled Nazi officer my father's age. I peer back into the attic, waiting for someone else to join us, but the attic is as empty as a bombed-out tank. Madame Roche makes the introductions. Monsieur Dorner, the Resistance, has sent a representative to see you. The man tilts his head at me. They sent a woman? He says in French. Yes, a woman, I say sharply. I'll count that as the 2nd notch against him, the first being that he's a Nazi. You're Dorner, then? Yes, Alexander Dorner. We'll see about that, I think. I thank Madame Roche and march into the attic. The space is cramped, just a closet, really, and the ceiling slopes at a sharp angle, so my head nearly grazes the rafters. The room lacks for a window, but a few beams of sunlight filter in through the old slats of the roof. I frown all over again. Dorner can't be much older than Theo was before he died, and I have to admit that he reminds me a little of my brother, too, with the sandy hair that won't lie flat and the lanky frame that could use a good bit of filling out. But that's where their similarities end. Theo never wore glasses, while this Dorner fellow sports a tortoiseshell pair. My brother also had that trademark glint in his eye, but there's no trace of that in this man's eyes. No, Dorners are big and blue and innocent, like a choir boy's. However, if he truly is who he says he is, then those eyes will be far from innocent. Dorner straightens and smooths the wrinkles of his button-down shirt. May I ask what happened to Philippe and Louis, the ones who escorted me here? They have other tasks to attend to, I lie. They promised me that. I don't care what they promised. You're under my authority now. If you have an issue with that, I can alert the Gestapo of your presence. Please, he says swiftly, don't. I think we'd all like to avoid them if necessary. He offers me a polite smile, which I don't return. I don't want to start out on the wrong foot. It's too late for that. Then let me apologize. His offer sounds genuine enough, but it does little to stamp out my suspicions. He's too young, for one thing. He's too polite, for another. And for a man on the run, he's far too calm. He should be jittery like Monsieur Travers, who nearly soiled himself after I dropped my Sister Marchand routine. But maybe Dorner is made out of tougher material than Travers was. He'd have to be to survive the journey out of Germany and into France. Or maybe all of his nerves subsided when he saw the resistance had sent in a woman. If that's the case, I'll be sure to kick those nerves right back into him. We practiced interrogations for weeks at training, and now I'll put them to good use. Dorner uses a handkerchief to dab the sweat from his forehead. I hope you'll accept my apology, Mademoiselle. I leave his question hanging between us while I walk about the room, noting which floorboards creak and which ones don't, allowing the silence to stretch and grow to unnerve him. You can call me Marie-Louise, I tell him, and leave it at that. I search for where we can sit. Establish the hierarchy, I think. Since Dorner is a whole head taller than I am, I gesture for him to take a seat on a turned-over fruit crate that he's using as a nightstand, while I take the ricketing dining chair left abandoned in the corner. When we're both seated, I'm the one with the height advantage. I should thank you for meeting me, he says. There's that smile of his again, but we'll see how long this prim and proper routine will last. What I'd give for a pack of chemically laced cigarettes, but they were all left on the train. You can keep your thank yous, I say bluntly. I'm not meeting with you as some favor. I'm here because you claim to have important information. I do indeed. I scowl. I'll be the one to determine that. So allow me to tell you how this meeting will proceed. I'll ask the questions, you answer them. If at any point I detect a lie out of you, we'll take a short walk to the Gestapo office in Cherbourg. Are we clear? He attempts another smile. May we discuss my passage to England? Don't get ahead of yourself, Dorner. Please, you can call me Alex. I'll call you Greta Garbo if I want, and we'll talk about England when I feel like talking about England. I've had about enough of him changing the topic, and I'm sure Harkin would tell me that Dorner is obviously stalling. That's when I begin with a simple question to kick off this interrogation. What's your full name? Alexander Maximilian Dorner. Your age? I'll be 21 next month. He's even younger than I'd guessed. Granted, as the war has dragged along, the Nazis have been sending out younger and younger soldiers to the front lines, but I don't know how a 20-year-old like Dorner could have jumped up the ranks so quickly that he'd know about Operation Zierfall. Where are you from? I asked next. Innsbruck, Austria, but I was raised in Munich. I was attending university there when the war broke out. What were you studying? I was working toward a doctorate in pathology. That certainly raises my brow. A doctorate? At your age? I started 2 years ago, he says. There's the slightest edge of pride in his voice, and I figure that he must have begun his university schooling at age 14 or 15. So he's educated. Very educated. But that doesn't mean I can trust him any more than I did a minute ago. If anything, I need to raise my defenses even higher. When did you join the military? At the outbreak of the war, I ask. He sits forward, slightly puzzled. When did I join the military? I channel Harkin and say, Didn't you hear me the first time?